Hello, and thank you for being part of today's town hall meeting, Fighting Fraudsters, keeping your money safe in the age of scams. I am Mike Kallmeyer with Spectrum News 1. Thank you so much for joining us. We are coming to you from the Maltz Auditorium in Montefiore in Beechwood, Ohio. We have put together a knowledgeable panel to discuss financial crimes against older adults and common scams to look out for, how to protect yourself and your money, and how to get help if you get scammed. So we are pleased to be joined by John Miller Steiger, the Regional Director of the Federal Trade Commission, Natasha Pietrocola, the Deputy Administrator for the Cuyahoga County Division of Senior and Adult Services, Sheryl Harris, Director of Cuyahoga County Department of Consumer Affairs, and Sue McConnell, President of the Cleveland Better Business Bureau. Thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate it for this very important topic. Let's first explain what financial fraud is. And Natasha, I'll let you start with this one. We use so many words, and we assume maybe that they're interchangeable. Fraud, scam, exploitation. They're not necessarily interchangeable. You want to talk about that?
That's correct. Frauds and scams typically are done with individuals that are not known to the person who's actually being taken advantage of financially. There are very common scams we've heard a lot about more recently. There's grandparent scams. There are scams that involve the IRS. There are scams that involve warranties. With exploitation, though, that's actually written in the state mandate for adult protective services. In our state, the mandate is basically that anyone who's over the age of 60, who has some type of impairment, whether it's cognitive or functional, and there is an allegation of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, might meet criteria for an investigation in adult protective services. And exploitation is one of those areas of abuse that we've seen tremendous growth in more recently. I'm not sure if it's because more knowledge and more media attention has been driven towards fraud, scams, and exploitation, but we've seen just alone this year 23% of our cases that we take here in Cuyahoga County have some exploitation indicated. So when we talk about exploitation, it often involves a person that is known to the older adult who is taking advantage of them financially without the adult's consent, often without the adult's knowledge. It often involves threats, intimidation, and deceit. And what they basically do is they infiltrate this person's life and they gain access to their finances and they steal from them. So it is definitely a crime. It's not prosecuted half as much as it should be, but exploitation involves a person in a relationship with an older adult. The law recently changed prior to September 29th of 2018. It was written that it had to be a caretaker who was the exploiter. And what the state did is we realized that caretaker is such a narrow term, it's been broadened to include a person. So that can involve anyone. We see a lot of times that the exploiter is a family member. It's somebody who gains the trust of the older adult, comes into their life, and for whatever reason, they feel that they have the ability to gain access to their finances and take advantage of them and steal.
Sheryl, the three words that jumped out at me were by deception, by threat, and by intimidation. Sadly, this is happening.
Right. So while Natasha's unit, actually alone among the groups up here, deals with those cases of, we separate them into stranger scams and known person scams. She deals with known person scams. The rest of us deal with stranger scams, and those are the people who call you on the phone and tell you that your Social Security is about to be frozen because there's been some sort of problem or fraud with that account. And all you have to do to free that up and keep your account from being frozen is pay money. So we deal more with those kind of stranger scams. They're people you don't know, but they're often masquerading as people you know or trust. So a grandparent scam, for example. Whoops. A grandparent scam, for example, where someone calls and pretends they're your grandchild and they were texting and driving in an accident, and now they're in a jail somewhere and they need you to send bail money. Those are imposter scams, as are these scams where someone pretends to be someone from a government agency.
Yeah, Sue, perfect timing for you guys to just be on the verge of releasing a new study. It's called Exposed to Scams, What Separates Victims from Non-Victims. Any results that you can tell us yet?
Yeah, we interviewed over 1,400 people who submitted a report on our Scam Tracker site. The Better Business Bureau has an online site called Scam Tracker where you can submit information about scams who have targeted you, whether or not you lost money. And you can also look up scams that are happening in your neighborhood by drilling down on a map or searching for keywords. So we survey these people who submit these scams, and again, not everybody was victimized. And what we were trying to determine is what separates the victimized people from those who did not get victimized. And we found that, and it's not too surprising, but I think the amount was good to see. 50% of the people who submitted a scam report to our Scam Tracker site that were not victimized because they had knowledge. They attended events like you're attending today, where they received information about scams. So they had heard about this, and they were tipped off. They knew better than to follow an impulse of fear or worry or something that made them turn over personal information or go buy gift cards for some reason. And the people that are isolated are often more vulnerable to being victimized by scams. And scammers will often tell you, don't tell anybody we talked about this, don't tell anybody you won this wonderful prize. And they want you not to get knowledge and not to get advice and not to get help. So we are going to be releasing all the results of the study, but it was good to know that by providing knowledge to people, which is one of the reasons it's so important if you are targeted by a scam or you get victimized that you report it to an agency, because law enforcement agencies can use that information to follow the perpetrators of these crimes. An organization like Better Business Bureau uses it to help publicly expose and provide information on our website that you can read and others can read. So one of the things we should mention is how important it is to report when a scammer has attacked you, contacted you, solicited you. Even if you don't lose money, just report it.
And certainly seniors are targeted. We'll talk about that in a minute. But let me just hear from all of you. John, I'll start with you. Just dispelling some of the myth that it's only seniors that are targeted with some of these frauds and scams. It's everybody.
Right. So Sue was talking about how important it is to file a complaint when you come in contact with one of these scams or frauds. And the Federal Trade Commission hosts an actually international database of complaints. And so we're able to look at the data, who complains, who doesn't complain. And what we see is that really the frauds affect every age group. And there's probably a fraud that is going to be specifically designed for every age group. Interestingly, what we find when we look at the complaints that we get is that you have older Americans, 60 years and older. That's under federal law, that's the age cutoff. So if anyone's offended, I'm sorry, that's federal law. People who are 60 years and older and complain to us, they are more likely to complain about scams. But the younger people who complain to us are more likely to identify that they've lost money to scams. So if you're looking at who's more likely to lose money, it's the younger people who are complaining. And then the flip side of that coin is of the older Americans who do complain and do say that they've lost money, they tend to lose a lot more money. So if you look at 70 and 80-year-olds who complain to us, they're likely to lose 3 times as much money as, say, a 20 or 30-year-old. But, as you said, the scams really do affect all of us, even things like the tech support scam. Tech support scam, which I can talk a little bit more about, but it's basically when you get a call or a pop-up on your computer that says you've got a virus and we can help fix it. You just have to, as Sheryl said, just pay us money and we can fix it for you. Well, that scam, you might think that would be more effective with people who are maybe less familiar with technology. We find out that that scam affects all ages.
You know, it's maybe not as much a cognitive impairment as it is that an older person is retired and simply more accessible. Does that make sense, Sue?
Well, certainly if you're at home
Yeah.
a lot, it's easy to contact you. But you know, scammers get to us in every way now: cell phones, emails, phone calls, texts. You'll be on your Facebook page, perhaps, and something comes up that looks like one of your Facebook friends. You were talking about imposters, and this Facebook friend is telling you that you are entitled to a government grant and it worked for them, and it's totally not your friend on Facebook. So I think all of us, whether we're at our work life or at home, you just have to be so skeptical and so aware, because really any way that a portal opens, mail, email, phone, text, we have so many ways to get into our wallets anymore and into our minds.
And if I could just dovetail on that, what we find when we interview people who've lost money to scams is that usually they're in some kind of bad place at that moment that they got the call or the text or the email. So the week before, they might have hung up on that same exact scam, but maybe say at the time that they got the call, they're having a health issue that's pretty major that they're dealing with. They're worried about someone that they love who's ill. They're just having some other issue in their life that's really taking a lot of energy for them. And so scams, like all of these quick hit scams, like the ones that we've talked about so far, they're all built kind of the same way. It's like, I'm going to tell you something, I'm going to pretend to be someone you trust, I'm going to tell you something that's going to make you panic, and then when you're just totally panicked and you can't think straight, and it's very hard when you're panicked to like start adding up all this stuff, when you're really panicked, I'm going to give you a solution, and it's going to make it easy, and the solution is going to be for you to give me personal information or money, and it's usually money that people want now, so because they already have our personal information. But that's the way these are designed, and we have people tell us over and over again, I hung up on that scam a year ago. I can't believe I got caught up in it now. So I just want to throw this out there to you. If you know you're in a personally vulnerable place, it's the anniversary of the death of someone you love, there's a time or that you go into a funk, that is not the time for you to be making any decisions about money without stopping and checking with someone else. It's just not safe for you, and I really do want to throw that out there as a caution.
In some cases, are some people losing everything? Or is it little bits more that you see?
Romance scams, you can just, they're different. They're long cons, they're usually emails, and we've had people declare bankruptcy or wipe out their life savings and those, and we can talk about those in a little bit, how they're different. But most of these scams, I think, they're kind of acute scams. They're like you might lose $5,000 to a grandparent scam, and then they'll come back and say, oh yeah, thanks for paying the bail money for your grandson, but also there's some damages for the accident. Can we have $5,000 more? And usually people will stop at that point. So that's about what their line is. Romance scams are just long term, and they're like, oh, I love you, let's get together, please send me money. Those go on forever, and people really do lose a lot of money to those. But the problem with these short acute scams, even the $5,000, and I think you know, the data you guys have show this, once you've been victimized, once you've lost money to a scam, you are much more likely to be contacted by other scammers because your name goes on a list and you get hit with these other scams and you're identified as vulnerable. And so you have more of the kind of calls that Sue's talking about, not just being home, but because they think you're a good target now. So in that sense, I would say losses depend on the kind of scam. It is.
And I think there's a psychological component as well. Somebody who may realize that they have been scammed, taken advantage of, exploited, there's also a fear component. Because if you admit to somebody that this has happened, then they start questioning you. Do you have a cognitive issue? Is it the beginning signs of dementia? Which is not the case. If there's anything we can stress here today, it's that scams, fraud, exploitation can happen to anyone. Social isolation is a huge component in all of this. You have to be vigilant for those people that you care about, that you're around, especially if you have somebody who's older and you feel are more vulnerable or isolated, not getting out and socializing. This becomes a method of gaining connection to some people. And then there's the stigma that somebody fears their independence will be lost, because when people learn that somebody's been taken advantage of financially, we automatically want to run to them, rescue them, help them, you know, ensure this never happens, and then we kind of get the person who's the victim lost in all that, because it's no longer them making the decisions, and they feel sometimes that people want to take control of what they are very able to manage. It's just that they've become, you know, susceptible to these kind of situations. So it's not always a cognitive issue. You know, there are some people, yes, because you age, you may be more, you know, there's a higher propensity to have some age, very normal related forgetfulness. We all have that, you know, and if you add distress into that because of a loss of a loved one or meeting financial needs, healthcare issues, that all compounds the issue. But, you know, it's not always the person who's got Alzheimer's or dementia that's being
And we don't say that to college-age scam victims or,
no, we use
you know,
scam
victims in their 20s. We don't say, oh, maybe you can't take care of yourself anymore. We just say, oh, I guess you
got scammed.
You got scammed.
Exactly.
There's so much advice and warnings out there. John, can you narrow it down to just a few of the red flags that we really want to watch out for?
Sure. As Sheryl said, the first thing that a scammer is going to do is make you afraid. You know, there's something urgent, there's something that needs to happen right away, or you're going to get hurt in some way. So your Social Security number is at risk. Your computer is about to get locked up because there's some virus on it. The grandchild is going to get locked up unless you send money right away. So something that gets you off kilter. These scammers, if they could probably get PhDs in psychology if they just would apply themselves, because they know exactly what buttons to push. So that's the first thing, because they know that people don't make good decisions when they're scared. Then the next thing is the urgency of the response. You need to give me something right now, the scammer will say. And it's not by coincidence, because we know that one of the best defenses against a scam is to have the person who's being contacted talk to someone else. Even just a friend. Hey, I got this call. Does this seem right to you? If the person can even just take that time and check in with someone else, a friend, a family member, someone that they work with, they are much less likely to become victimized. So that's another red flag to watch out for. And the third one that I'll just focus on now is, if they're asking for money, how are they asking for that money? So when someone calls up pretending to be the IRS or the Social Security Administration, they're not going to ask to be paid with gift cards, but the scammers are, because they know that that's very hard to trace. It's very hard to get back. So if someone is contacting you and asking you to pay by wiring money or by gift cards of some kind, and that could be Apple, it could be Amazon, it can be you know, Heinen's or Giant Eagle, right? Anything like that, that's also a red flag.
I can attest to the fact that they're targeting everybody. I got a call from the Social Security Administration saying that my identity has been stolen. They, correct me if I'm wrong, they will never reach out and ask for certain information. Is that right, Natasha?
That's absolutely correct. You're not going to get a call from an IRS agent, and you're definitely not going to get somebody requesting payment in the form of any of the methods John just described. That's much more formally done. Even if you logically think about some of these situations where there's a grandchild who's arrested and you have to bail them out of jail. You bail them out at the office, or at the station. You do not, you know, make a transaction where you're buying gift cards in return to post a bail. But again, they're playing on people at a certain point in time, and I think all of us can honestly look at ourselves, and when you're under some type of distress, you don't make the most logical decisions, and that's what these individuals definitely prey on.
Let me ask you this, Sue, is there do the banks and financial firms, do they have any responsibility here? Or is it all on us to watch ourselves?
Well, you do have to take responsibility and also, you know, help spread the word to others you know that may be vulnerable to scams. And the banks aren't able to keep you from getting your own money. You know, if somebody is telling you to withdraw a bunch of money and send it to them or stick it in a magazine for some lottery you've won. That we have had cases where tellers definitely try to warn their customers. And so I don't think it's that the banks don't care. You know, legally you have a right to obtain your own money, and so, but there have been cases where they've tried to intervene, and you know, something that our study showed about victims versus non-victims is there were cases where somebody went to the local Walmart or went to a place to buy gift cards, and someone that worked there said, why do you want these, and tipped them off that this is a scam, this is not, you know, do not buy these gift cards. So I think they're, but at the same time, you know, knowledge is good. Being skeptical is good. You know, we're an agency that says start with trust, but I think working at the BBB for all these years, I've learned not to trust too many people or too many situations. And things have become so sophisticated. Technology has helped these scammers so much. They can spoof their phone number when they call you, so it looks up differently. It looks differently on your caller ID. They can use, you know, robocalling, and although we're doing things to combat that now, they know how to. As we've said, they know what buttons to push, they know how to use the technology, they know how to make themselves look legitimate, and they are very convincing, and they are pros at being cons, the bottom line.
And in the state of Ohio, and this is specific to exploitation, so under the Adult Protective Services Law, last September they did add financial institutions to the mandated reporter list. So in the past, physicians, attorneys, clergy, social workers, they were all on this list of people to report elder abuse. So self-neglect, neglect, exploitation, and you know, physical abuse, sexual abuse. But last year, because you know, this is anywhere from a $3 to $36 billion annually industry where there's loss occurring in this financial realm, that they've added certified public accountants because of the transactions they're seeing with their clients. They've added banking, the banking industry. They've added financial planners to that. They've added notary publics, because a lot of times you see manipulation of power of attorneys, you see manipulation of wills that have been set, you know, in stone, and somebody have always wanted them in a certain way, and now we're seeing somebody come into someone's life who may be changing that for whatever reason, and it's usually not a good one. So they did add a lot to the mandated reporters to kind of beef that up so that there are people being educated on this on all fronts.
John, final thought, where can family go to get help, or where can seniors go if they need financial help? Resources out there?
There are a number of resources. All the organizations here on the panel have great resources. One of the things that you've heard a lot of times is how important education is. And the Federal Trade Commission, for example, has a whole section on consumer education. We have, for example, a pamphlet, Pass It On, and it combines the ideas that we've been talking about. So it has very straightforward information about the scams to look out for, designed in a way that people can share it with each other. So you can share it with a family member, you can share it with a friend, because as we've all said, we know that if you know about a fraud, you're less likely to fall for that fraud. So I would encourage people to check out the resources that we have. For example, Federal Trade Commission, ftc.gov, and you can get all sorts of information there. And to go back to a point that Sue made at the beginning, just how important it is to file complaints with us. The law enforcement at the state, local, federal, international level look at the complaints filed with the FTC, and we can spot trends, and we can help identify who the bad guys are.
It was 30 minutes. We could have done 3 hours on this. So thank you so much. We'd like to thank Sue McConnell, John Miller Steiger, Sheryl Harris, and Natasha Pietrocola. Thank you so much. Very valuable and important information. We appreciate it. And thank you for joining us for this special town hall meeting on fighting fraudsters, keeping your money safe in the age of scams. I'm Mike Kallmeyer with Spectrum News 1. Thank you for joining us. And we're not done. So I can almost hear a lot of questions out there. So we do want to, and thank you guys so much for staying, and an excellent job on the show. Our Facebook Coverage continues on Facebook Live, and we want to go ahead and take some questions now. If anybody has a question, just raise your hand, and we do have a microphone back there, so just wait for the mic to come up to you. Right up in the front. You're next.
Hi. I am on the do not call list that the government set up, yet I continuously receive these robocalls constantly with scams regarding my social security number or my credit card. What can I do to prevent these robocalls, especially since I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing?
So that would be for me, because it's the agency that I work for, the Federal Trade Commission. We're the ones that created the Do Not Call registry that was amazing for a few years. My advice is actually still to make sure that you're on the Do Not Call registry, and I'll just say something really quickly about that and then get to the robocalls. There's still a benefit to the Do Not Call registry, even if it's not stopping these robocalls, because if you're on the registry, then and you get a call from someone that you don't already have a relationship with, they're breaking the law. You don't even need to worry about whether what they're saying is true or not, because they're breaking the law by calling you. So they are untrustworthy. You know that from the get-go. That's an advantage to being on the Do Not Call registry. So I would always still encourage people to sign up for that. So the robocall issue. The reason that the robocalls have become such an issue is technology. They are breaking the law. Just to be clear up front, anyone who robocalls you is breaking the law. So again, not trustworthy. But that's also the challenge, because these are criminals. These are criminals who are most likely not in the United States. They could just be sitting with a laptop. I mean, these aren't even people behind these calls. This is all computer operated. So they could be sitting in a laptop in a parking lot in an Eastern European country. It's really hard. And the phone number will show as your neighbor, right? So it's very hard for government to be going after these guys. We're doing it. We've brought a lot of cases. We've shut down hundreds of millions of robocalls by suing them. And shutting down the operations, interfering with the operations. The solution is going to be a combination of law enforcement and technology. The technology is something that we've been bringing along. So the Federal Trade Commission a few years ago sponsored a technology competition to come up with a solution. And one of the winners was a company called Nomo Robo. Some of you may have heard of it. If you ask your carrier, you actually can get it for a lot of carriers, and it does cut down substantially on the number of robocalls. And actually, all of you, I would recommend that you talk to your phone carrier, your cell phone carrier, your home carrier, because they should be providing you with at least some services that will help. And the last point I'll make is that just in the last maybe 6 months or so, the telephone companies have gotten together with the FCC's encouragement, a different agency, Federal Communications Commission, and they are coming up with a new technology that's going to be even more effective, so they say, at being able to identify who the robocallers are versus who the legitimate callers are. So I guess I would say, one, stay on the Do Not Call registry, because it will help with some calls and will help with your screening. And two, talk to your carrier, see what resources they have available. And three, watch this space, because more should be coming to help us.
But also, if I can just add, do not answer the phone to numbers that you don't know, because once you pick up, they know there's someone there to pick up, so you'll get more calls. And some people get the robocalls on their cell phones, and they're really good at ignoring them until that one last one comes in, and then they just can't stand it anymore, and they dial it back to find out who's calling them. And that's bad too, because then they know you're going to respond and you're going to get more. So the best thing you can do is just let everything go to voicemail if you don't recognize the number. And there are always going to be those times when you're waiting for a call from the doctor, you don't know what you don't know what number they're going to call from, and you pick up the phone, and darn it, it's a telemarketer. It's one of these robocallers. Just hang up. Don't engage. Don't talk to them, because The more you engage with them, the more they feel like they're going to win in the end. And it's just better, just hang up the phone. Don't tell them how you know they're scammers, because then they just change their script for the next person down the line. Just hang up the phone.
Tough when they're using those local numbers.
Yes.
You see a 216 or a 440.
And those automated voices that sound like real people, that's really frustrating too. So.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, the other day I was using my computer and it was going slowly. And I said, I think I'll go to the manufacturer, who was Dell, and see if they have suggestions. So I put in Dell and their number, and I got somebody that says, hello, I'm with Dell, and da-da-da. And what he can do for me and how he can get into my computer and go through it. And I'm going along with this because I think it's Dell. And when it starts going down the line, I start to think, wait a second, all this information they're getting from me, what's it going to cost me? It shouldn't cost me anything. And I say to him, is this going to cost me anything? And he says, yes, around the bush. So how does somebody that's not Dell get into be able to pick up pick that up from me instead of being Dell?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just going to, and you may have something else to add. I know that, like, if you're Googling something,
right,
and you look at the first result at the top, you know that's a paid advertising result. So it could be that they've paid for a search word that when you enter Dell, their ad's going to come up. But there are, there are listings that will, and this isn't only looking up Dell, it's looking up airlines and looking up hotels, that if you click on the wrong link and you're not paying attention, it's misspelled a little off. You're going to get right into the hands of a company that is happy to make you think they're Dell or Microsoft or American Airlines, and just take it from there. They'll just run you down that road.
So 2 things that you can do to kind of prevent that. If you go see your, your library's reference department, they may be able to give you the actual company number. But also the Better Business Bureau, bbb.org, they have listings for all sorts of companies, whether they're, their actual phone numbers that you can call. I mean, you can find out if they're verified. You can get to their sites through there, through the BBB website, which is another good way to try to do it.
Yeah, and I would just reinforce that the scammers, there's a way that you can pay money, that the scammers can pay money in order to get their names up at the top of any search result. Mm-hmm. And they pay, and I know this because we're investigating one right now, they pay $20, $30 million in order to get up as high as they can in order to do exactly what happened. And it's so easy for us. We're used to typing in a search and you look at the results. But you really do have to be careful, try and find those independent sources for the phone number. And the other thing that I'll say is we sued, the agency sued a company that was running a scam like that for hotels, where they made the consumer think that they were calling a particular hotel, and it wasn't. One of the things they did, they would answer the phone reservations, right? So that the person who was calling would think, oh, this must be the hotel that I'm trying to reach. So as Sue said, the cons are pros. They're good at this.
Some ads are legit, of course, and there's so much that happens behind the Google curtain, as they say, that I've gotten into the habit of kind of scrolling past the first 5 or 6 to get to the real site, right?
And look very carefully at the name.
Yeah.
Look very carefully at the name and the website it's taking you to.
People have even been reporting that there's smart devices at home like Alexa. If they'll say, call Dell, they're also, the smart device is getting that result online that really isn't Dell and connecting you with somebody who really isn't Dell. So yeah, you have to do that the old-fashioned way. Look it up.
I think some people are very untrusting of the Alexas of the world. Are you guys seeing that more? They're recording every word you say, right?
Who knows what scams are going to be surfacing through Alexa? Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Question.
Yeah,
Wondering if you could address when you get the phone call about your credit card being adjusted or taken away or someone's using it, and it's really hard to figure out sometimes about the credit card charges and what all is going on.
Well, this is, from my perspective, this is actually just a variation on the question that we just got. Because what it comes down to is making sure that you know you are talking to your actual credit card company. The #1 scam complaint that we get is about imposters, and you've been hearing why. There are so many different versions of this. So if you get a call from your credit card company, and legitimately they call you when there's fraud, and thank goodness they do. But one of the things that you might want to consider is saying thank you very much, hang up the phone, pull out your credit card or a credit card bill, and look at the phone number there, and then call that telephone number. That's a way that you can be sure that you're actually dealing with your credit card company and not someone who's calling and just pretending to be your credit card company. And they can be very good at pretending, right? As Sheryl said, so much of our information is already out there. If a scammer comes across something that links your name and your credit card number, even part of your credit card number, because all that's floating out there, they can call and say, I'm calling about a credit card that ends in 1234. Well, you think it must be legitimate. So say thank you very much, hang up, look up the phone number you know is right, and call them back.
Good advice.
And that did actually happen to me. At one of my credit cards, somebody had called and said that there was some suspicious activity, and because of the industry I work in, I did exactly what John said. I called the number on the back, I hung up, and when I called them, they said they had not contacted me at all. So it's amazing about the tactics they're using. They're very convincible, and these aren't necessarily people that are getting rich and then going to the Bahamas and vacationing. These are a lot of bad people that are taking the money that they're gaining from the scams and these frauds, and they're diverting it to drug cartels, to terrorist activities. These aren't good people, not that any thief is a good person, but the money's not going where we would romanticize these scams are actually occurring. These are some very sinister, overseas, very difficult to track, and once you lose a lot of that money, I think everyone on this panel can attest to the fact you often do not see that ever be repaid to you. There is no restitution, unfortunately.
Any other questions? Question there.
Could you talk a little bit about strategies for using debit cards? How should they be used? Should we use one? Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to say, like debit cards are like anything else, right? I mean, they access your bank, right? So what we say is use them to get cash. We don't recommend necessarily using them at a point of sale place, like when you're purchasing something, because if there's an error there, it's your money, right? You've got to fight to get it back. Whereas a credit card, you have the right to dispute. By law, you can dispute an unauthorized charge. So if you're ordering something online, don't use your debit card. If you're making a purchase and you have the option of a credit card, use the credit card. If you need to use a debit card, get cash, go use that. I mean, we just really think that it's harder to fight to get your money back when you have a right, you're protected to some degree, but the protections aren't nearly as good. With a credit card, as long as that's caught and you say that's not mine, and you don't have to pay it. But debit cards, sometimes the deadlines are a little different, and you have to act a lot more quickly, and if you don't notice for a little while that the money was taken, you can lose a significant chunk. Do you know? I don't know. I can't remember offhand what the deadlines are, but they're very different, and credit cards are safer if you can use them. Yes.
Sounds like the advice is cash only and just don't use it for anything else.
No. I mean, credit cards are good because you have the right to dispute.
Well, I meant for a debit card, just use it to get your cash. Use that credit card for everything else, right?
Or use cash or use a credit card, but to use a debit card online, that's like Russian roulette. Right. I mean, it's really, really difficult. Your bank account, right? Well, and if something, let's just say that it doesn't, that the product gets delivered, but it's not as advertised, you can dispute that if you paid with a credit card. It's much harder when you paid with a debit card. The levels of protections are really, really different, and so yeah, get a credit card if you're going to shop online, for sure.
And what I've noticed about some areas where you're able to use your debit card, like gas stations or even the ATM machines, there's been a lot of upgrades. I don't know if anyone else have noticed them, and there will be a disclaimer with even some of the gas stations stating that this is one of those specialized, readers that should have some protection built into it, I think, where the person isn't able to, what are they, jammers or
skimmers?
The skimmers, where they actually steal. I noticed the gas station I used had one recently, and our ATM machine changed. So I'd be very cautious too where you're using your debit card as well.
Right, right.
Questions?
I was using my debit card, and when I got the bank statement, I noticed that on one particular day I had 3 Uber rides. And I didn't use Uber that day or ever, and I called the credit card company, and they put a stop on the card and told me I didn't have to pay that, and it was a debit card.
Well, you do have a right to dispute, but if you didn't notice right away that you had that and you failed to initiate the dispute quickly enough, you could lose some of your cash.
The other part of that is because it is as you said, a pipeline to your bank account, depending on how close your balance is, if they take money out of your account and then you write a couple of checks and you're not aware that the Uber thing was charged, you could get overdraft, you could get all sorts of other problems as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
When she mentioned Uber, that reminded me, in the past couple of weeks, I've gotten a couple notifications saying that Uber, the same kind of thing has come up, saying that somebody was Uber trying to get in the account. Are there companies or brands that we should be on the lookout for that scammers use more often, like Uber, for example, to say that that's them?
Well, I think the scammers follow the news and they follow the market. So if there's a company or a situation that's in the news, for example, a hurricane, scammers are going to start contacting people saying that they're actually a charity for victims of the hurricane. Or if there is a data breach of some kind, scammers will follow up and say, we can get your money back. Give us your information. We'll help get your money back. And the same thing then with companies. Any big company, think about it from the scammer's point of view. It's very cheap to make a call or to send an email. So they're just going to blast out. They're just going to contact millions of people, maybe more than that. And they're just hoping that some people will respond and will fall for the trick. So to increase their chances, they're going to use companies that are well known. They're going to use companies like Uber, or I just got an email saying that my Netflix account had run out.
Me too.
Yeah. That seems to be, like, in the last month or so, a very, very popular one. So they're going to use any company that a lot of us are likely to use, because financially, literally, they just need 1 in a million of the people that they contact to go along with the scam, and they're going to make money.
And sometimes they might not ask you, for your banking information necessarily. They may just want you, they may say, oh, hey, and if this bill isn't right, just click here, let us know. And then when you click, you've got malware on your computer, and then your computer is sending spam to other people. So those kind of unsolicited emails, it's just, as folks up here were saying, turn your card over, read the number off the back, and then contact the actual account. Look at your billing statement, call that number if you have a question. Just don't click on the links that are emailed to you.
And scammers like to lurk online and pose as selling brand name merchandise, which is cheap knockoff counterfeits. They love around the holiday season to start, anybody can post a website and make themselves look like a multi-million-dollar corporation. They often lift pictures of officers and owners of other large companies and put them on the scam website to make themselves look very legitimate. So you have to be very careful, online, even when you're buying something. Not so much people that are reaching out to you, but who you might be reaching out to maybe apply for some kind of guaranteed loan if you're in a financial situation, or trying to buy presents around the holidays for grandkids. I mean, they're getting a part-time job or work-at-home job. There's so many other scams online that you might run across legitimately looking for something, like the Dell computer we were talking about. It's also very easy and cheap for scammers to create a website. Very, very easy.
In regards to email, they can use what looks like a friend's email. Is that right? I mean, it'll be coming from a friend, but just don't click on a link, right?
Oh, you don't want to click on a link, like Sheryl said, or open an attachment unless you're absolutely sure it's a legitimate email coming to you. But sometimes, like we've talked about with the phone calls, they may put a sense of panic or something into you from an email, and you'll be prone to click on it. And we have a whole realm of scams called business email compromise scams, where people pose as your boss, or in one instance of a woman we've been in touch with and you've been in touch with, she got an email. It was from her minister. From what she thought was her minister, saying that, asking the people in the congregation to buy gift cards to help a women's medical clinic. And she thought this was really her minister, and so she went out and bought all these gift cards and goes to church a couple days later, and the minister says, "We hear that these emails are going out. This is not coming from me." So imposter scam, email compromise scam, that checked a bunch of boxes there.
And we've talked a lot about scams and fraud that involve people paying out money for something that they believe they're getting. You also have to be leery of those scams where you're winning money. Yes. Where, we really didn't even touch upon that today, but if you are winning money, but you have to pay the taxes up front, or there's some kind of glitch to that, these sweepstake and lottery scams, those are very sinister in themselves, because we're also finding that they have used some of the clients as mules, where you're actually money laundering. You're shifting money around for different kinds of organized crime kind of figures, and you're not realizing this. You legitimately think you won something, and if you haven't played a lottery or you're not in a sweepstakes, why would somebody randomly contact you? So if anyone talks to you about, hey, I won some money, make sure you educate them very quickly that you've got to be very careful, because they will request account numbers, and you provide the account number. They may actually deposit the money, but they may ask you then to shift the money to a different account for them. And we've seen a lot of people, even around the holidays, who enter in these arrangements where they think they're like UPS drop-offs or Amazon drop-offs, and they think they're doing like a service and they're getting paid. They're finding out that they're really kind of involved with illegal merchandise, kind of scams and things like that.
Well, quick final thought, John, since you guys are out there chasing these guys down, hopefully, is it getting better, worse? Are we winning? Are we losing?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yes, on
all of it. Yeah. No, the truth is that like I said, the scammers follow the news. So scams are constantly evolving. We are successful at shutting down one type of scam, and so then they shift their efforts towards another scam, and we follow them there, which might seem like it's a game of whack-a-mole from the outside, but for me, I think of it as the police officer on the beat, right? There's not going to be a time where there is no crime in a city, but if the police officers aren't there, we would all be in a big trouble. So we are successfully shutting down operations. We are successfully getting sometimes money back to the victims. The scammers are evolving into the next thing, and we are going after them where they'll be.
Thank you. Thank you all for what you do. Really, and for the help. And thank you to the audience as well. Thank you to our Facebook community that's been watching at home. Sue McConnell, John Miller Steiger, Sheryl Harris, Natasha Pietrocola. Thanks so much again, and we appreciate it. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and you at home on Facebook enjoyed it as well. We're coming from the Maltz Auditorium here at Montefiore in Beechwood, Ohio. This has been a presentation of Fighting Fraudsters, Keeping Your Money Safe in the Age of Scams. I'm Mike Kallmeyer with Spectrum News 1. Thank you so much for joining us. Good, great job. Great.
Thank you.
Very well done.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We brought
Thank you.
we brought materials that are out on the table.